see your screen.
Can you please tell me if you can see it?
Yes.
Great. Okay, excellent. Sorry about that, but now let's get started. So we're very excited to have a range of really good speakers with us today, which include Naomi from Consumers International, Catherine from New Earth, Marcia from Aachen University, Adam and Garth from Junction, Amanda from Qantas, and Andrea from Fundación Chile. And you will hear from all of us around our experience and work on the communication of social impacts. And then in the end, we'll also have some time to discuss with you what work you are doing. And of course, we'll be happy to answer any questions you will have. You are currently all muted because we want to avoid background noise. But if you have any questions, please do raise your hand or write in the chat box. Just to say that this work had been funded through the International Climate Initiative of the German government and has been led by 3 organizations, but about that we'll tell you a bit more later. I'll hand over to Naomi now for a quick intro on the context.
Hello all, just to let you know, this webinar is part of the Consumer Information Programme of the One Planet Network. The One Planet Network is a global network set up by the UN 5 years ago to work underneath Sustainable Development Goal 12, which is responsible consumption and production. There are 6 programmes sitting underneath the One Planet Network: food, lifestyles and education, building and construction, consumer information, tourism, and sustainable public procurement. If we go to the next slide, all of these programmes work on different pieces of research and try to convene partners together to produce meaningful impact towards Sustainable Development Goal 12. And the Consumer Information Programme is currently co-led by the German Environmental Ministry, the Indonesian Environmental Ministry, and the NGO Consumers International. And we're supported by a 20 organisation strong advisory committee and partner institutions as well. And our aim is to support the provision of quality information, improving the accessibility, availability and credibility of information to consumers to help them consume in a more sustainable way and help to really drive behaviour change amongst businesses, consumers and the government.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Naomi. And I'm trying to go to the next slide. Excellent. So we will now tell you a bit about the development process under which this white paper was developed. And Marcia, you should be able to speak, I hope. If not, because Marcia is dialing in by phone, so I think maybe she needs a few more seconds to start speaking. But I'll start talking to you about this. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so I mentioned before the 3 partners that were part of developing this paper. And it was actually developed under a working group of the Consumer Information Programme that Naomi just introduced to you. And that working group was led by the Joint Research Centre of the European Commission, by New Earth and by UN Environment. And in terms of persons, we have Marcia Traverso, who has now moved from the Joint Research Centre to Aachen University, and Catherine from New Earth, who were really the leaders steering that work. So also a big thanks from our side again from your involvement in that exercise. The whole reason that we developed this white paper is that social impact assessment is gaining traction, but communication is still not the norm. So the objective was to identify good practices of really product level communication in this area to inspire progress. And we also wanted to provide recommendations on how and what to communicate. And we'll tell you a bit more about the outcomes later, but of course we hope that you all download the paper and read it as well. The target audience of the paper are really companies and standard setting labeling organizations, but also governments and NGOs. And for those of you who are aware of our other work under the program, we also try to ensure that the white paper links to the guidelines for providing product sustainability information. I'm afraid Marcia still is not able to speak, but Marcia, if you are, please feel free to just interrupt me and jump in. So we did not do this work alone. We had a great working group with members who really work on these issues and provided us a lot of guidance. And you can see them there. And also, again, a big thank you from our side to all of you for being involved and providing your expertise and your insights. It was really a great process. This is the structure of the white paper. I don't want to go into detail here because, well, you have to download and read it. But you can see that there are different areas, and we have also been diving a bit into the assessment part and the why. What is the business case? What is the policy case for talking about social impacts? But then really the bulk of the work is focusing on how to communicate. And we did that by looking into existing communications around social impacts and also around environmental impacts and how those could be adapted to communicating social impacts. We are making a distinction in the white paper about on-product and off-product examples. Often social impacts are really the thing that is not included on the packaging anymore because companies already focus on certain mandatory things they have to put on the packaging. And then on top of that, the first thing they would put is environmental information, but the social information is often the one that then gets left out. And so we also give a couple of recommendations for off-product. But in terms of on-product, you can see here, for instance, there is a food labeling system in Ecuador that is structured as a traffic light. And this one only addresses the dimension of health. But the working group thought that this could, for instance, be an easy and good way to communicate also other social impacts eventually to consumers. The kind of recommendations we give, you just see a few here, is, for instance, that the main social issues should be communicated. But again, we shouldn't communicate everything and too much to not overload consumers. So it would be useful to identify those issues they're more interested in and tackle those in the communication. But in the assessment part, we do have to make sure that all hotspots are addressed so that we do not run the risk of burden shifting. Then just a few examples from the off-product communication that we have in the paper. Actually, one of the examples you see here, Micódigo Verde, will be presented to you in much more detail later by Andrea, so I'm not going to talk about that. But also the sort of recommendations we gave here is with off-product, so the use of websites, apps, and other communication mechanisms can be a good way to amplify the message by using different channels and repeating, because we're all overwhelmed with a lot of information, so repetition can't hurt. But also we can target different audiences by different channels. So for instance, social media can be used for maybe a younger audience that is more using social media, whereas maybe an older audience can also be reached by providing information in the store, in the retailer itself. I'm just checking, Marcia, I think you could be able to speak now, so I would still like to give you the opportunity if you unmute yourself.
And just to let you know, Bettina, she's emailed to say that she cannot speak or hear you, so if you just please continue.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Great.
Okay, sorry, I'm really sorry. My computer doesn't. I'm now with mobile. That's why. Sorry.
Or is that all, Marcia? But maybe you still want to share your experience in leading this process?
Yes, of course. It was really a pleasure for me to be part of this working group, and we learned a lot from also from the committee, from the stakeholder group, and we had the opportunity to fix at least the first starting point for what's going on social impact communication. We gave, as you already presented, we gave mainly the state of the art, which are the best practices in the document, and also which are the suggestion for the future. I hope that that's, I mean, I think this is just the first project. We will continue, as probably Catherine will say later. And yes, that's it. Can you still hear me?
I can, Marcia.
Okay, that's good. But I don't need anything anymore now.
I wonder if Bettina had a technical problem.
That maybe yes, because.
I think so. Does anybody want to continue? Catherine, can you take over with this slide?
Sure.
Thank you.
So, if you can just mute yourself during the time I speak, because there's a big echo. Thank you. So, through this process, which lasted about, I think, a year and a half, we developed recommendations and next steps. And it was really a wonderful experience for me, because it was one of the first time that I experienced that we brought together people with an expertise in social assessment, with people with great expertise on communication and marketing. So I thought this was a really fruitful exercise, and I think the white paper is a a good demonstration of it. So some of our recommendations for moving forward is, of course, the question of cross-industry efforts and harmonization. We know it's not easy, but it is, something that is quite desirable from a variety of sides. Also providing support to third-party verifier of social impacts, through providing capacity building and resources is something we feel that the UN10YFP, that's a good role that we could play. Encourage companies to harmonize their approaches, social criteria, questionnaires, and tools. This was done, for example, with this social and labor convergence project. And hopefully this will also be done in other industries. Again, we know this is not easy. And then collect and highlight good practices on social impact communication from developed countries, but also from developing countries. And I can't move the slides.
Thank you. I think there we are.
They're back. And then I really wanted to highlight the work that Marcia and I are now co-chairing with colleagues, which is to update the existing guidelines for social LCA, and that was a recommended steps from this group as well. There's been a ton of experience since the first guidelines were published in 2009. And this community, and I think as the whole of the community of social impact assessment and social LCA, at the resulting conclusion that it really needed to get updated to reflect all those experiences. So this is a project underway, and there will be a chapter on communication added to the new guidelines, to which this working group will be invited to provide feedback and comments, as a way to really keep this work going. And that should come during this spring semester. And as part of this, There's a need to develop specific methods, tools, and practical guidance. So we hope that in this new social LCA guidelines, there will be more of it. But there's also, you know, I think some deeper work that needs to be done that will need to be conducted over a more extended period of time. For, you know, specifically the assessment and communication of social impacts, maybe, you know, product group approach, and the consumer information program is continuing to collect example of good practices, and they continue to support relevant initiatives. So please, you know, if you have, you know, relevant examples or experiences, communicate with Bettina and Naomi. So I think this will be the time to show examples.
Yes. Thank you very much, Catherine. Bettina is now listening, but she's just trying to put the other PowerPoint for us to move on. So thank you very much.
No problem.
We are very sorry for the technical problems today, and thank you very much for your patience.
All right, this looks like my set of slides coming up. Hi, everyone. My name is Garth. I'm from Junction Strategy, and I'm here on the call with my colleague, Adam. We work with organizations of all sizes, from small, medium to large corporates and international NGOs. But today I wanted to share a case study about communicating impact for smaller scale organizations, which may have fewer resources to do this kind of work, but they make up the majority of economic actors. Customer loyalty is on a decline, and for some organizations, the struggle just to stay relevant to their customers is getting pretty desperate. Consumers in the marketplace no longer trust brands and institutions in this post-truth media era, and that's just one symptom of a broader crisis in trust going on in the broader world. Next slide, please. The case that I want to share today is a project that we did with 50 farmers markets to help them figure out how to communicate the social impact of buying food from farmers markets, which has seen a rise in popularity in the last decade, certainly in North America, but in regions around the world. So like, what is it that makes an apple from a farmer's market different than an apple from a supermarket? That was sort of the core question that the markets wanted to be able to speak to. You know, what can a market vendor tell their customer about an apple they're holding in their hand that is going to communicate some sort of social impact value? Next slide. And next slide. So our first step was more like a stumble, really. We surveyed vendors and market operators and examined the existing claims about product impact from farmers markets, and many were, unfortunately, baseless. For farmers markets, freshness and nutrient value are not valid competitive points. Industrial farms are actually often more effective at timing their harvest and using powerful coolers and shipping things far and fast, so that when produce is in season, which is when farmers markets are also selling the same thing, conventional farms actually go from farm to table faster. You can keep moving through the slides as I speak to the points here. Price is, oh wait, back up one. Price is not also reliably or consistently a favorable point for farmers markets in terms of impact to the consumer. And as for the ecology and economics of the different modes of agricultural production, honestly, they're pretty complex to try to distill down to an easy system of metrics-driven reporting and impact communication targeted at consumers. Ideas like food miles or number of hectares in production, or even standards-based certifications like organic are not necessarily meaningfully or directly connected to ecosystem or population outcomes in a way that gives more answers than questions for consumers, and it certainly doesn't directly help markets to market the value of what they're doing. So we went out and we surveyed people shopping at farmers markets to ask what impacts mattered to them, and the #1 outcome that people cared about was actually the relationship with the farmers vending at the markets themselves. Their perception of value was very, very much relationship driven. And while they were certainly interested in other dimensions of the value that markets create, these were secondary to the relationship that they had with the farmer themselves. And this is only one stakeholder in the market. I mean, vendors had different information needs. They wanted to know about the total foot traffic in the market and average sales, and that vending, and especially that the vending criteria were enforced, so that vendors in the market were following the rule of make, bake, or grow it yourself, and other market actors weren't allowed to sell there. That in itself is a key indicator for a farmer's market success in incubating new food businesses. Municipalities that give markets permission to operate wanted to know about spending multipliers. They wanted to know if people shopping at markets are also visiting other businesses in the area and providing a local economic lift. It turned out that the market organizers themselves were often the only ones who really ranked the broad economic and environmental impacts of the market as their #1 concern when it came to talking about product impacts. So carry on to the slide after it says what we learned. So what we learned is that the beneficial and impactful qualities and values that farmers market has may be inherent in the system, but not in the product itself. That is, the difference isn't actually in the apple, but it may be that apples just might taste better when you buy them from someone you know. The second is that value is subjective for different audiences, so it's very important to know your customer and audience. Had we not taken the time to meet customers at markets where they were at and understand what they value, we could have wasted a lot of time assuming that they cared or should care about the same kind or detail of impact information that market managers care about. And that leads to the third point, is that the audience or the consumer that you're reaching may not need to understand a complex issue the way that you do to make a decision to support you if you are operating an impact project. Facts won't save us. We don't need to try to make everyone into market managers, and that's essentially what a lot of product impact communication efforts are doing. So what we did at farmers markets, we created a suite of reporting and communications tools, surveys, data templates, and accompanying messages that would help markets help all of their stakeholders and themselves know what they needed to know and show about the impacts that they had. The set of tools that we created, you can move to the next slide, they minimized the amount of time that everyone needed to spend collecting and providing impact data, so that each stakeholder, so the managers, the vendors, the shoppers, and the regulators or the municipalities, all got the essential information they needed to make a decision to support the market without burdening people with collecting more information that wasn't actually going to be used to make a decision. It's so easy to burn time and energy collecting measures like the details of somebody's organic certification, or economic measures like how much farm income is derived from market sales, as proxies for impact. But these are not necessarily meaningful for customers in terms of converting them or further engaging them or winning their loyalty. And they're also things that may not willingly be disclosed by farmers in a competitive market. So I'm going to turn it to Adam to talk about our key takeaways that would apply to a broad range of projects.
Thank you, Garth. Hello, everyone. Nice to be here. So just to pass on some of these general tips that we discerned from this project on communicating impact. Next slide, please. So 3 things I just want to touch on. Tell a whole story, and I'm sure we're all familiar with this idea. There's too much out there where people are just telling what they think is the good story, and you've really got to be clear on all of the issues that you have to address, and it's in that way that you gain credibility and you earn trust, which obviously all market traders in this case and organizations in general are seeking. You need to respect your stakeholders' time when you're collecting impact data from them. And I think it's a really useful thought experiment to just go say to yourself, well, what value am I offering these stakeholders at this time? People who have taken the time to give you that data, to provide you with the data that you need, should also be able to hold you accountable to your results in some way, or at least to influence your choices of the outcomes that you're accounting for. I know this is a favorite quote of Garth's, and so I'm going to steal it from him. Jeremy Nichols, the founder of SROI Network, always used to say, any approach to measuring social impact that doesn't include a transfer of power to stakeholders is just marketing. And to genuinely respect your stakeholders is to go further than just marketing to them. And the third one here is about connecting data collection to a real demand. So you've really got to be sure you're helping someone make an important decision. It could be you that needs to make that decision. If you're not collecting and communicating impact data in a way that connects with what you really need to manage, then you're probably wasting time and effort. We use this phrase, understand what you want to know and show. And it's a really useful kind of rubric to take away, just to make sure that you're not collecting a whole bunch of stuff that you're not going to do anything really useful with. Thank you. Next slide, please. So we've just added a little bit about us, as we're brand new to the network and delighted to be members as of this week. So just very briefly, we are a certified B Corporation, a member of the Social Venture Network, which is just in the process of being rebranded the Social Venture Circle, which brings together impact investors and social enterprises. And we say that we are committed partners to new economy leaders. We define the new economy as one that is fair and inclusive and green. And it's our ambition to accelerate the shift to that new economy. And we do that through supporting social ventures, social enterprises, driving campaigns for change, so often working with NGOs, and also providing support to those intrapreneurs, those people working within inside larger organizations, if you like, more mainstream businesses. And we help them help their organization to jump the curve to this new economy. So that's a little bit about us and what we learned from this project. Obviously happy to take any questions later on if we have time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Garth and Adam. We're now going to move to Quantis. If anybody does have any questions on the Junction presentation, we're going to leave some time at the end for any questions. So please do save your interjections for then. Thank you. Over to you, Amanda. Okay, great. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Great. Thanks. Thanks for inviting us to participate as well. And I know it's a very busy time of year for everyone, so appreciate everyone's willingness to listen and participate in this as well. My name is Amanda Martin. I lead our sustainability communications offering at Quantis. We're a global sustainability consultancy. We work with organizations across many different sectors, from food and bev to apparel, personal care, technology, and many more. And we help our clients measure, set strategies, and achieve sustainable change with a metrics-based approach. So I stepped into this working group a little bit at the end. I took over from my colleague, Carol Dubois, which some of you might know, as I've joined Quantis in the past 2 years. So today I wanted to share with you our communications canvas, which was in the white paper. Maybe you can go to the next slide. So this is, I would say, this is not rocket science, but it's a very, very important concept and tool that
probably most people should be using when they start to communicate. We always start all of our communications projects with this, and with these 4 simple questions that really guide everything that we are trying to do. And it's really important to ensure that you have effective, on-strategy, and credible communications, especially when we're talking about social impact and sustainability type of communications. It's really important to go through this exercise. So we start always with the why, as you might know, Simon Sinek always says, start with the why. And this is not just blah, blah, blah. It's really important because we need to first understand what are you trying to achieve with the communications. People oftentimes jump to what are you going to do? I mean, okay, we want to report or brochure, we want to do a video, but really, I think it's important to back up a step and understand what do you want to achieve, what are you trying to inspire, what actions, behaviors, or beliefs you want to influence. And we always try to think about it too in terms of what do we want our audience to think or actually feel as a result of seeing these communications. Next, we go to the who. So who is, it's of course the target audience, but in a deeper level, it's really trying to understand their understanding and what people are bringing to the table. And I think as we just heard, I think it was Garth said in the last speech that it really is important to also acknowledge and understand that different audiences are going to have very different expectations and things that they're looking for. And it's really important to try and understand those before we start communicating blindly. And also take into account what the situation is that they're when you're communicating to them. So the third one is what? It's the key message. And this is really important to, especially in any kind of communication in this space, we need to understand not just what is the main message, but also what are the metrics or data or facts or standards, certifications to support the story. It's really important that communicating on any sustainability or social impacts, that we can really build trust and ensure credibility by making sure that every type of message is backed up with real data. And finally, the channel. And as I said in the beginning, this is the part that everyone likes to do first, but we really try to do it last. So it's just, trying to think about how we're going to reach the audience and also the situation they might be in. What is the context which they're going to see this? So right now, today, this webinar, I know it's a busy time of year, people are stressed, maybe half listening, maybe doing emails. So it's important to consider these things when we're creating communications to make sure that we're trying to get a simple message across in an engaging way. And the most important thing also that we cannot forget is to track the effectiveness. Just like a lot of people here, I think, might come from a scientific background and think a lot about metrics and when we're assessing social impacts with life cycle assessment, but it's important also to track the impact of our communications efforts. And sometimes this is forgotten because they're seen as just a nice add-on or another thing to do, but actually trying to set up from the very beginning, what are the expected outcomes, and making sure that we can track those with similar types of surveys and tools is important. So can you go to the next slide? So the first one is just zooming in here on the target audience. So I know that we're discussing here part of the consumer information program, but we always say that before you get to the consumer, there's a lot of important people to get through. So we call this kind of the sound waves of sustainability communications, if you will. And I like the fact that here you really, with a lot of big companies, they have thousands of people. And we always think about talking to the consumer, but I find that one of the most important audiences are the internal teams. And if you really need to get the internal people on board, because then they can be really your best ambassadors and to champion the messages that you're trying to communicate. So we start with the internal teams when possible, and we think there's a lot of work always to do on engaging and educating people internally about some of these topics. The next one would be professional stakeholders. This could be government institutions, NGOs, academia, investors, financial community. These are also all people that play a very important role. Then customers, and this would be, of course, in a B2B setting, but also when it comes to end consumers, the customers could be your retailers, and they also play a very important role in trying to communicate ultimately to the end consumer. So it's really important to think about all these different groups and not just to jump ahead to the end consumer in communications. And then next, I'm just going to show 3 quick case studies that we've done and take you through how this framework can work with a simple example. So the first one is some work we've done with Nespresso in Switzerland. And basically, this was a project to try to engage, like I said, that very first audience, the internal teams. So the objective was really to raise awareness, inspire, and change perceptions. The feeling is that actually Nespresso is doing a lot of work on sustainability, but a lot of people internally don't know about it and don't understand it very well. So they wanted to really convey that message internally. So the idea was to do an in-office campaign. And if you go to the next slide. So here you see this was just an exploratory concept. The project is ongoing actually, but this was a concept around the idea of peace of mind. So it's just trying to show a little bit of that Nespresso kind of has your back, because they're actually doing a lot behind the scenes. So while you're enjoying your coffee, they're busy doing a lot of efforts to make sure that the coffee growers are getting respectable wages, that the planet is being cared for through a lot of recycling efforts, tree planting, and things like that. Can you go to the next slide? The next case here is with Eastman. It's a chemical company, and they have a product called Naya, which is this gets a little bit technical, but it's a filament material a filament yarn or fiber that goes into clothing. And basically with them, we did a project that was really focused on the customers all along the supply chain. Because even though their product is an ingredient, we could say, in many of the clothes that we might wear today, they realize that the sustainability topic, especially in the apparel industry, is really important, and it's really driven by the brands. But oftentimes, the fashion brands don't understand always what are all the elements that make up a sustainable fiber. And so it was an important job to try and educate and raise awareness among not just the fashion brands, but all through the supply chain in the apparel industry. So right down to the mills and the yarn spinners and all of the different steps. So the work we did with them was to kind of help them position and align the brand of Naya all around the sustainability platform. So if you go to the next slide, you can see here that basically we did a lot of interviews and understood from the customers to what are the criteria that are important, and what are the specific certifications they look for and trust. And then through that, we were able to guide the delivery of communications on this. So for this type of filament yarn, there's 3 types of concerns that they need to respond to make sure it's a sustainable fiber. The first is around being sustainably sourced wood pulp, and then you can see you have specific certifications that back up those claims. The second is around the safe and environmentally sound chemical use, so that it's something that is not causing any social or environmental harm. And the third one is the low impact manufacturing process. So making sure that the whole process is designed in a way that has a low impact and is trying to close loops as much as possible. So it's this project is really interesting because as part of the project itself, we actually did interviews with a lot of people along the value chain. And another thing I wanted to mention, which also I think repeats a little bit from the previous presentation, is that we find that actually in the interviews themselves, it's a nice way to connect with people and educate and raise awareness. So oftentimes you think of interviews as market research or getting information, but in fact it's also an opportunity to connect with those people and to raise awareness about the topic as well. And next slide. Yeah. So the last case here is for a brand of cheese, Leerdammer. You might have seen this, depending on if you're in Europe. So on this one, we worked with Bell, who's the producer of this, to try to raise awareness and eventually promote social behavior change. So we're working with them on a couple different projects. Leerdammer's one, and right now we're working on a project with the brand Kiri, and it's trying to raise awareness about specifically packaging and the recyclability of packaging, and to try to influence positive actions in terms of especially what to do with packaging at the end of life, and specifically to recycle it. So in this one, this project was for both, had a dual audience. So you'll see on the next slide, actually, if you go to the next slide, you'll see here that we did, after a life cycle assessment and work on understanding the impacts of the packaging, we did a dual communication. So the one on the left, it actually is a long scrolling infographic. To put it on the slide, it just cut it in two, but this is an infographic that was designed for a customer. So it's a retail customer. So you see it's a bit more information, the look and feel is a bit more serious, and it's really geared to the retail customer. And on the right side, it's an infographic that's a bit more playful and fun, and always using a lot of equivalencies to bring the message to end consumers. So this is another interesting example of how you can think about saying the same message, but in two very different ways depending on the audience, and taking into account what are the things that are going to more grab their attention and communicate to them that they're really looking for. So this is also, I think, really important when we're talking about any kind of sustainability communications and social impact. And I think that's it. The next slide gets it. So thank you very much, and I'll be also open for questions at the end.
Great, thank you very much, Amanda. I'm now going to pass on to our last case study, which is Mi Código Verde, and pass you to Andrea Chino from Fundación Chile. Welcome, Andrea.
Hi, thank you very much. Yes, so my name is Andrea Chino. I work in Fundación Chile, which is a public-private non-for-profit organization here in Chile, and we have been working with projects that promote sustainable consumption and production for many years now, but today I want to talk about this project in particular, which is Mi Código Verde. It is part of the portfolio of the Consumer Information Trust Fund of the One Planet Network, and we're implementing it here in Chile with CERNAC, which is the National Consumer Service, and the Ministry of Environment. So next, please. Mi Código Verde is a platform that gives information to final consumers on the social and environmental attributes of products. And our goal is to create a competitive advantage linked to these attributes by encouraging and facilitating consumers to make purchase decisions with this criteria. So giving them the information and the ability to do so. Next, please. All the information that we are showing in this platform, and I don't know if you changed the slide, I can see, yeah, there. So all the information that we communicate in the platform is based on a qualitative life cycle approach. This means that for each product category, we identify which are the main hotspots, the main spots in the life cycle where there is more impact, and then evaluate how the brand in particular is managing these hotspots. Next, please. And how we gather the information that we are showing, we work with the producers, obviously with the companies. So it's an online platform, they have a login, and for each product category, there's a different questionnaire they have to answer and validate all their answers, obviously, with documentation to prove they are trustworthy. And then these questionnaires are evaluated by us, by Fundación Chile, and based on their answers and their validation, we give them different attributes, which can be, for example, like, I don't know, animal welfare, or the energy attribute, or the waste attributes, etc. So we give them the attributes based on how they are managing each of their hotspots, and then we make claims on these different attributes and communicate this to consumers. Next, please. So basically, a big part of our initiatives consists on validating and constructing claims for products. which is what this paper is about. We work not only on social claims, but also environmental claims, but I believe that the process is quite similar for both, so I'm going to talk in general. And I just wanted to share some of the learnings and insights we gained in this process so far. This has been 2 years now, the project, but we launched it only 3 months ago, so the main insights for now are with the companies. We're starting to gain insights with the consumers now. So the main challenges we've had with the companies have to do with the part previous to making the claim. It has been hard to gather companies and products at the start because it takes a lot of, it is very high time consuming, this process for them. So to make a claim, we believe you have to start by analyzing your whole product. Even if you don't communicate everything, you do have to make a whole analysis and know where your product stands in each of the hotspots. So that's why we make them analyze and answer all of the questions in the questionnaire, even though they know what they want to communicate and on what hotspot they want to concentrate. They do have to make a whole assessment and know everything about their product. And here there are two main difficulties. The first is gathering the information. Most of the time, especially in big companies, information is not centralized, at least here in Chile. So the person who does this is either in the sustainability area or in the marketing area, and they have to start gathering information from all the other areas, and that takes a lot of time and effort. And also, since we have a life cycle approach, many of the questions will also be about your suppliers, and there's a traceability weakness here on the social and environmental indicators of their suppliers. They normally will ask for more basic indicators of, health and innocuity, etc. of their products, but not necessarily social and environmental indicators. So that's also a big effort for them. And the second is validating the information, because it's not enough for them to say or state that they're doing something. We actually need the validation behind it. And especially for SMEs, they've had a very hard time validating things they're actually doing. And even though they're actually doing it, they don't have the official documents or the validation to prove so. And also for all companies, it has been hard validating information from their suppliers. So gathering these validations. Most of the time it will work if they have a certification or if there are big companies that audit all of their suppliers, but otherwise it has been really hard. And this is especially hard on social aspects because they're not necessarily proven by hard data, whereas some environmental aspects can be done that way. And also another difficulty, well, obviously the difficulty linked to this is that it's highly time consuming, and at least here in Chile, this type of communication is kind of a nice to have, but not an urgent matter. So it's hard to have them prioritize this before other matters. And the other thing that has been hard with companies, with some companies really, is that they might be afraid to make a claim because they believe this opens them to judgments on other aspects of their product and of their company. So sometimes they prefer to have a low profile if they are not sure that they have all their hotspots managed, or at least are aware of where they stand on all of them. And this happened to us, it's happened with more than one product, that they analyze the whole product and then decide not to publish because they're afraid they will be judged on the other hotspots they're not managing right now. For example, we had one chocolate that they were doing a lot in the packaging area, but they hadn't quite solved all of the cocoa supply issues. So they decided finally, no, they wouldn't risk it. However, they also identify a lot of opportunities in this type of communication. The first and obvious one is differentiation. So there is a group of consumers, even here in Chile, which is a developing country, that are gaining more interest in these attributes. But what happens here, and we did a consumer study before developing the project, is that consumers don't realize that there is a supply of these products, these more sustainable products, or these products with social attributes, because they can't really identify it in the markets or in the e-commerce, etc. So if you don't communicate, there's no way that they will identify it. And the second thing is that they're not necessarily actively looking for this information. So even if it's hidden somewhere in your website or in your reports, etc., it has to be directed to them, because otherwise most of them will not actively look for it. So it is an opportunity to differentiate for them this platform and this visibility. Also, you already talked about this, but trust is a big one here. Even if you don't have all your hotspots solved of a product, transparency does build trust. So what we've done with some of the products and some of the companies is that sometimes if you identify that you might be more advanced in some of the aspects, but in others you still have to work on, and you transparent that to consumers and say, we're aware that we have to work on all this, and these are our advances and our attributes up to now, then that builds trust with them. And it's much better that way than then finding out and attacking you on something you have not communicated. So transparency does build trust, and some companies did see that as an opportunity. It is attractive to media. We launched this 3 months ago, and we got a lot of attention from media, TV, radio, newspapers, everything, because they believe it's something attractive for them to communicate and to show. And it might be more attractive than other marketing claims. So this is an opportunity and an excuse for companies also to get media attention. We actually got interviews on TV for companies, and they were really happy. So it is an attractive aspect to pursue, and also it avoids future problems. Many of the companies had not made this analysis before, the whole life cycle analysis of their product, and they had not detected problems or weaknesses they had today. So it helps you know what you should work on, and it also prepares you for any conflict with stakeholders you could have in the future, because they won't find something you don't already know about. And also what I was talking about, transparency. If you recognize it before they do and say you're working on it, it won't generate mistrust. Next, please. So how to make it work? Things that have already worked for us, or that we're going to have to work on now. The first, next please, is that it's important to give context. So before you're communicating a claim or an attribute of a product, the consumers have to understand why it is relevant and important that the product has it. So they have to understand the problem it is solving before you make the claim, in order for them to perceive the actual value of the claim you're doing. So for example, in our platform, what we do is, before we show the attributes of specific brands, we give consumers the information on what this product category should have, what attributes it should have, and what hotspots it should be managing. So we say, for example, for wine, it is important to, manage the use of pesticides, because these have an important impact on biodiversity and on human health. So once they know that, then they go to the specific product, the wine, and they see that one wine has this attribute, it is organic, etc. And then they understand why this is important. So it's important to give them the context. And what you see on the right is an Instagram publication that we made, which was actually the most popular we have. And it was on how to choose a coffee, or a more sustainable coffee or tea. So it gives you what you should look for. And then when you find it, you understand why it's relevant, right? Next, please. Another aspect that was really hard for us, and we still have to work on, but it's really important, is to find the right point like on synthesizing the information. So most consumers, even though some might want all the details, most consumers want a quick answer and solution. So what we did is we constructed eight attributes, which are the ones I was talking before: water, energy, waste, etc., based on the consumer study we did, which is what consumers were interested in knowing. And the first thing you see when you see the catalog of products is which attributes they have. They actually cumplen. Sorry, my English. They have worked on. And you can actually filter by attributes. So if I'm only interested in water, for example, I just press there on water, and all the products that have this attribute will appear. That's the first filter. But then for those who do want more detailed information, you have to give it to them. It's important that you do. And then you can go into each product, and it shows why they have each of the attributes, and they have there the more specific information. So it's hard to find that combination of the short version and the detailed version. And from the studies we've done now of the pilot, we know we still have to work on that. They still believe it's too much information. But it is important to find that mix. Next, please. Third is the language and the type of information you're showing. So it has to be simple, otherwise they won't understand and they will automatically lose interest. And one of the things that they told us from this study we made is that it has to be like you're talking to a friend, because that's what most consumers, what general consumers will listen to. However, it still has to be very clear what you are communicating specifically, and what you're communicating must be validated. So in the platform, we make first a general statement, and then underneath it's the details of why that statement is true, to justify that statement. And it has very specific reasons why. So for example, you will always, especially in this kind of initiatives, when you're showing big companies that are always likely to be judged. If you go back one, we just had a comment on Coca-Cola, for example, because we were making a post on them there on our platform. And one of the consumers were stating, how can you promote this if it's not like good for your health, etc., etc. And then you have a clear justification, because if you go into the product, it specifically states why that product is in our platform and what are the specific attributes that product has. It doesn't talk anything about health. So then you can have a good reply, go and see, and you can see the specifics of why it's there, etc. So you can't have incorrect or general information that might be misunderstood. Next, please. And the last one I wanted to mention, and I believe it's really important, is to, and they talked about this before in the other presentations, is to evaluate the effectiveness. Don't just assume what is important to consumers and what is working. For us, we did a study previous to the project, and now we're doing one with the project already going, a pilot. With consumers, we're doing focus groups to understand, before we did, to understand what they wanted. We based all of our platform on that, on what they wanted, but it's different for them to imagine than to actually see it. And we have proven that, because now we have a lot also of input on how to improve it, even though we did what they were supposed to want. So now we're doing an evaluation of the platform that has already products online and is already working. And we're receiving a lot of feedback we will have to implement to improve it. So it's important always to constantly evaluate and gather the improvements there. And finally, next please. I just wanted to say, obviously we have been working in this for 2 years, but we have only launched it like 3 months ago. So there are a lot of other platforms that are similar to us communicating this kind of claims, that have been working for much longer. Some of them are these four that we actually studied before doing our project, which are really good and you might be interested in looking at. The Ethical Consumer Guide, that's in the UK. The Question Mark, which is in the Netherlands. How Good and the Good Guide are two initiatives in the US. And you might want to look into those as well, because they have a lot of experience on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. I'm afraid we're we are running over time. It's now 2:05. I am going to say, please, could you all email your questions, but I am going to open the floor for one question. If anybody has a question, please say it now. And then if everybody else could please email any further questions, and we will continue the conversation there. Okay, I'm going to take that everybody is going to continue to email their questions. So I'd like to say thank you, everybody, for joining. I do apologise on behalf of the technological difficulties that we struggled with at the beginning. And I hope you did find this webinar interesting. Please do download the white paper, Shout Out, Communicating Product Social Impacts. And if you are interested in finding out more about the Consumer Information Programme, or the One Planet Network in general, you can find us online and just Google One Planet Network or the Consumer Information Programme, or use the email that's on our screen, and we'd be happy to tell you more, or if you're interested in becoming a partner too. So I hope you all have a good rest of your day. Thank you again for joining. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.